There comes a moment when silence says more than words. When desire fades into stillness, and you begin to hear a deeper rhythm, a pulse beneath the noise. That is not your hunger. That is your soul remembering its strength. We live in a world that teaches us to pursue, to touch, to consume, but rarely are we taught to pause. In that pause, something ancient awakens, not the fear of missing out, but the freedom of tuning in. The practice of abstinence is not about denial. It is about rediscovery. It is the art of letting the body grow quiet, so the soul can finally speak. When people hear the word abstinence, their minds often jump to deprivation, to what is being withheld, what is not allowed, or what one must sacrifice. But to those who walk the path of self-mastery, abstinence is not a desert. It is a garden. It is not the absence of something, but the redirection of everything. Every ounce of energy, every breath of attention, every spark of desire is no longer lost outward, but reclaimed inward. And in that redirection, something powerful begins to happen. The noise quiets, the storm calms, and the silent voice within starts to rise. In traditional Eastern philosophy, energy is not wasted, it is transformed. The body, mind, and spirit are seen as one living, flowing system. What you withhold on one level nourishes another. When we abstain, not out of fear or shame, but out of wisdom, we begin to accumulate life energy, known in Chinese as qi. This energy, when not scattered through indulgence or emotional impulsivity, consolidates within. And where does it go? It begins to strengthen the internal structures of awareness, clarity, and presence. Abstinence becomes the furnace in which your focus is forged. Imagine a river that's always flooding its banks, moving wildly and without direction. This is how many live: constant stimulation, endless seeking, rushing into experiences without pause. But what happens when you build a channel for that river? Suddenly, it has force, it can move turbines, it can create power. So it is with desire. When you give it direction, it becomes willpower. When you restrain it wisely, it becomes presence. I once met a man in his late 50s who had spent most of his adult life chasing relationships. He shared that he had been married 3 times, and in between those marriages, he rarely allowed himself time to be alone. Always moving from one relationship to the next. Always seeking companionship, validation, connection. But he reached a point where all of it began to feel empty. One day, in a moment of exhaustion, he said to me, "I don't even know what I want anymore. I only know how to chase. I've never actually been still." He decided to do something radical. He chose a year of complete abstinence. No dating, no intimacy, no emotional entanglements, but more importantly, no seeking. At first, he said, the silence was unbearable. It was as if he had turned off all the music in a room where he'd been dancing blindly for decades. But in that silence, something began to shift. He began to reconnect with his breath. He started to feel his feet on the ground, and for the first time, he could hear his own thoughts. Not the thoughts driven by desire, but those born of truth. That year changed everything for him. Not because he gained something new, but because he discovered what was already there. His strength, his discernment, his boundaries. He told me later, "Now I can love from a place of fullness, not hunger." That has made all the difference. This is the essence of abstinence as energetic redirection. You are not starving your life. You are strengthening your soul. In neuroscience, we now understand that habits, including sexual or emotional habits, form deeply embedded patterns in the brain's reward system. When someone repeatedly acts on a desire, the brain becomes conditioned to associate pleasure with that external stimulation. But when one practices abstinence, particularly from compulsive or excessive stimulation, something powerful occurs. The brain begins to rewire itself. It is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change. Abstinence allows space for the brain's reward pathways to reset. The dopamine system, the very mechanism that drives impulsivity and craving, gradually calms. The result, greater impulse control, more mental clarity, emotional resilience. What the ancient monks understood through meditation and self-restraint, neuroscience is now beginning to affirm. And why is this important in relationships? Because when your nervous system is calm, your presence deepens. And presence is the foundation of intimacy. Not touch, not words, not even chemistry, but presence. When you are calm within, your partner can feel safe beside you. When you do not seek them to complete you, they can meet you from a place of equality, not entanglement. In this light, abstinence is not rejection. It is refinement. It is choosing to refine your inner state before sharing it with another. And in doing so, you become magnetic, not in a superficial or seductive way, but in the way a mountain draws the clouds. Strong, still, and centered. There is a story from the Taoist tradition of a young disciple who was enamored with a village girl. He felt his desire for her consuming him. One day, his master noticed that he had become distracted in his training, so he brought him to a well in the forest. The master said, "Stare into the water. What do you see?" The disciple said, "My reflection." Then the master dropped a stone into the well. The water rippled. "Now, what do you see?" "Nothing, only waves." The master smiled. "That is your mind when consumed by desire. Distorted, unclear. Wait." They waited in silence. Eventually, the water stilled again. "Now, my reflection returns." The master placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "Abstinence is not to suppress desire, but to still the mind enough that you can see yourself clearly. Only then will you know whether what you seek is love or illusion." The lesson here is timeless. Without inner stillness, we do not know what we truly want. And without clarity, our relationships become mirrors of confusion. When the body is always in motion, always chasing, touching, reacting, it leaves no room for the soul to speak. But when we bring the body into stillness, when we discipline our desires not through force but through wisdom, something extraordinary happens. The soul begins to communicate through sensation, through breath, through intuition. You begin to feel when someone is genuine, when their words match their energy. You begin to sense emotional undercurrents that were once invisible. This is not magic, it is sensitivity. And sensitivity is not weakness, it is a higher intelligence. It allows you to navigate relationships with grace, to sense when someone is hurting without them saying a word, to know when to speak and when to remain silent. This level of attunement is only possible when your own inner world is not drowned in noise. There's another example from a woman in her 40s who had recently ended a long-term relationship. She found herself emotionally drained and unsure of her identity. She decided to take 6 months of emotional abstinence, not just physical celibacy, but a complete pause from romantic or emotionally charged connections. No dating apps, no texting late into the night, no replaying what could have been. Instead, she turned inward. She began journaling, practicing breathwork, taking walks without headphones, learning to sit with her own company. At first, she said it felt like withdrawal, like she was missing a limb. But slowly, she realized that what she had been addicted to wasn't love. It was distraction. The distraction of another person's validation, the comfort of not having to face her own emptiness. But in the silence, her creativity returned. Her laughter came back. She wrote, "I thought I had lost myself in the relationship, but truthfully, I had never fully met myself until now." This is the transformation that abstinence can unlock. When the noise stops, what emerges is not silence, it is self. In psychology, this relates to the concept of interoception, our ability to perceive the internal state of our body. Individuals who practice mindful abstinence often report heightened interoceptive awareness. They become more attuned to their breath, their heartbeat, their energy shifts. And with this awareness comes emotional regulation. You begin to notice when anxiety arises before it overwhelms you. You recognize the tightness in your chest before the argument escalates. You respond rather than react. And in relationships, this creates an environment of safety and respect. Abstinence, then, becomes a form of emotional hygiene. Just as we fast to give the body rest, we abstain to give the heart space, to cleanse the subtle toxins of past disappointments, old attachments, and unconscious patterns. And this space is not a void. It is sacred. It is where your inner compass is recalibrated. In Eastern medicine, the kidneys are seen as the root of life force. They govern our willpower, our inner stamina. Excessive indulgence, especially in sexual activity without grounding, is believed to deplete this energy. But through periods of conscious abstinence, the kidneys are replenished. The will becomes strong again. And from this strength arises clarity, not just about others, but about your purpose. So what does this mean in everyday life? It means that when you find yourself constantly needing someone else's attention to feel good, pause. When you notice you're always seeking touch, conversation, or connection to avoid loneliness. Pause. When your desire becomes frantic, when your mind races toward, what if they leave? Or, what if I'm not enough? Pause. Not to punish yourself, but to listen, because underneath that urgency is often a quieter truth. A need that cannot be met from the outside. When the body is still, the soul begins to whisper, "You are already whole. You do not need to be needed to be valuable. You can choose when and how to give your energy. You can love without losing yourself." This is where abstinence becomes liberation, not from others, but from dependency. It opens a space where love can grow, not as attachment, but as offering. As we transition from this place of energetic redirection, another principle emerges. The stillness of the body unlocks the language of the soul. You begin to see that silence is not absence. It is presence intensified. To live in presence is not to withdraw from life, but to enter it fully, without resistance, without distortion, and without the chaos of being ruled by your own emotions. Presence is the discipline of being wholly where you are. It is the quiet art of anchoring your attention, not letting it be pulled by memories, expectations, or the stimulation of the outside world. And yet, presence is not only for monks and sages. It is a vital skill in every relationship, in every conversation, and in every moment where a human heart seeks to be understood. Presence is not a performance. It is a vibration. When someone is truly present with you, you feel it. Their eyes are not darting elsewhere. Their breath is calm. Their nervous system is not threatening or grasping, but open and still. In their presence, you do not feel judged, nor do you feel invisible. You feel seen. This is not a mystery. It is physiology. Your nervous system, the vast web of communication between your brain, body, and environment, is designed to constantly scan for safety. This process, called neuroception, happens below the level of conscious thought. The moment you enter a room, meet a person, or hear a tone of voice, your body already knows whether to soften or tense, whether to open or defend. When you are present, your breath slows, your shoulders drop, your voice steadies. You are no longer projecting future scenarios or rehashing past wounds. In this state, your parasympathetic nervous system, often referred to as the rest and digest system, becomes active. This system signals to your body and to others, it is safe here. In relationship dynamics, presence is the invisible thread that holds trust together. It is not the cleverness of your words, nor the depth of your feelings, that makes someone feel secure. It is the regulation of your own internal state. When your nervous system is regulated, others feel that regulation, and this feeling, this embodied safety, is what allows people to open up, to share vulnerably, and to connect authentically. There is a story I once heard from a therapist who worked with couples on the verge of separation. One particular couple had been married for 20 years but had become emotionally estranged. The wife said, "He's never really with me. Even when we talk, I feel alone." The husband, defensive and frustrated, said, "But I am here. I come home. I ask how your day was. What more do you want?" The therapist, instead of offering advice, asked them to try an experiment. "For the next 5 minutes," she said, "say nothing. Just face each other. Really present. No fixing, no proving, no performing." They agreed. At first, they sat stiffly. But as the silence deepened, something shifted. The husband's posture softened. The wife's breathing slowed. Tears welled in her eyes. When the timer ended, she whispered, This is what I've been missing. Not your words, you. This is the difference between physical proximity and emotional presence. One touches the body, the other touches the soul. And yet, presence does not happen by accident. It is cultivated. It is protected. And often, it is born from abstinence, not necessarily from people, but from distractions, from the compulsive checking of messages, from the constant need to express opinions, from the craving to always be stimulated. True presence arises when we create space within ourselves, when we abstain from the mental noise long enough for stillness to become natural. In Eastern martial arts, students are trained to regulate their breath before they ever strike. Why? Because breath is life. It is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. When the breath is shallow, the mind becomes anxious. When the breath is deep and steady, the mind becomes anchored. This applies not only in combat, but in conflict, in relationships. Every argument is a test of breath. Every tension is an invitation to stay rooted or to lose your center. Try this. The next time you are about to speak in a heated moment, pause. Take one slow, full breath through the nose. Feel the air enter your belly, not just your chest. Hold it, then release, slowly. Ask yourself, am I speaking to connect or to control? Often, this one breath is the difference between reaction and response, between wounding and understanding. Modern neuroscience confirms what ancient wisdom has long known: conscious breathing activates the vagus nerve, a key component of the parasympathetic system. This not only slows your heart rate and reduces cortisol, but also increases your ability to empathize. When you are calm, you can perceive nuance. You can sense the emotional layers beneath someone's words. You can respond, not from the wound, but from the wisdom. Presence also has a posture. The body speaks a language that the mind cannot fake. When your spine is upright, when your chest is open, when your shoulders are relaxed, you emit confidence and openness, not arrogance, not submission, but a kind of natural dignity. This posture is not for show. It is a message to your nervous system. I am grounded. I am safe. Others feel this, especially children, especially partners who have been hurt. They know, without knowing how they know, whether you are truly with them, and they respond accordingly. There is a teacher of mine who used to say, the way you sit at the dinner table is how you sit in life. What he meant was that your body reveals your mind. If you are slouched, fidgeting, scrolling, or tense, then your mind is not calm. If your body is grounded, alert yet at ease, then your mind is likely clear. This is why posture and breath are not small things. They are portals to deeper presence. And presence is the doorway to connection. Let us now look more closely at another essential dimension of this journey: the building of emotional musculature through abstinence. Just as the body grows strong through resistance training, the emotional body grows strong through intentional restraint. Every time you choose not to lash out, not to indulge, not to chase after comfort in the form of unhealthy habits, you are strengthening your emotional core. And just like physical strength, emotional strength is not always visible, but it is always felt. There is a misconception that emotional freedom means doing whatever we feel. But in truth, that is emotional captivity. To be free emotionally is not to act on every feeling, to be aware of them, to sit with them, and to choose a wise response. This is where abstinence becomes a discipline, not just of the body, but of the heart. A young woman once shared her story of heartbreak. After being ghosted by someone she thought was serious, she felt a storm of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, longing. Her initial urge was to text, to call, to confront, to post cryptic messages online. But something in her paused. She remembered a teaching from her meditation class: do not make a move until the water is clear. So she didn't act. She didn't react. Instead, she sat. She journaled. She cried. She breathed. She watched the waves rise and fall inside her. And after a few days, the need to reach out faded. What remained was something deeper: self-respect, clarity. She realized that her pain was real, but it did not have to own her. That choice, not to act on impulse, is what we call emotional musculature. It is strength of the highest order. In relationships, this strength is vital, because love, without discipline, becomes attachment, and attachment, when unchecked, becomes dependence. But when you have trained your emotional muscles through abstinence, through pausing, through choosing, you bring to your relationships not need, but offering, not hunger, but presence. And this offering is powerful. It says to the other, I want you, but I do not need you to fill my void. I choose you, not because I am incomplete, but because I am full and wish to share that fullness with you. This is the essence of sacred partnership. But let us not romanticize the process. Emotional abstinence, like physical training, is uncomfortable. It is the decision to sit with discomfort instead of distracting ourselves. It is the discipline of not sending the angry message, of not indulging the revenge fantasy, of not spiraling into old stories about being unloved. In these moments, the path forward is not always clear. But the practice is pause, breathe, observe. Just as a warrior trains in silence before facing battle, so must we train in stillness before we engage emotionally. This kind of training also rewires the brain. In psychological terms, when we resist the pull of impulsive emotional behavior, we strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision making, regulation, and foresight. Over time, this gives us greater control over our emotional impulses. It becomes easier to respond with wisdom, even under stress. Abstinence builds this capacity. Every time you choose not to indulge a harmful emotion, you are reprogramming your mind. You are teaching it that discomfort is not dangerous. That feeling something intensely does not mean you must act immediately. This delay, this pause, is the sacred space where growth happens. There was once a monk who said, "Every time you feel the fire rise within you, do not rush to put it out or to throw it at someone else. Let it burn inward. Let it warm your clarity. Then speak from the embers, not the flames." This kind of emotional transmutation is not suppression. It is alchemy. You do not deny the emotion, you use it. You channel it. You allow it to refine you. Abstinence, then, is not coldness. It is containment. It is the decision to become a vessel strong enough to hold intensity without spilling it carelessly onto others. This capacity is rare, but it is what makes someone dependable in love. Not just passionate, but trustworthy. Not just emotionally expressive, but emotionally intelligent. To reach this level of discipline is not to reject pleasure, or love, or connection. It is to honor them. To bring to them the strength of your inner mastery. To say, "I do not need to possess you. I choose to relate to you as an equal, with presence, with patience, and with depth." It is in this soil that true intimacy grows, where hearts meet, not in desperation, but in devotion. Where love is not a storm that sweeps you away, but a flame that warms and endures. And so we walk forward, breathing deeper, standing taller, pausing longer, not out of fear, but out of reverence. For the relationship we hold with ourselves determines the relationships we are capable of holding with others. When we speak of abstinence, many think only of denial, of what is withheld, what is renounced. But to the one who walks the inner path, abstinence is not emptiness. It is space, and space is not absence. It is potential. It is the sacred gap between stimulus and response, between craving and action, between expectation and embodiment. When we speak of cultivating relational clarity through abstinence, we are not talking about avoiding relationships. We are talking about seeing them clearly, without distortion, without projection, without the smokescreen of unmet inner needs. In a world addicted to validation, to distraction, to hurried intimacy, abstinence becomes a form of purification. It clears the lenses through which we view others. And perhaps more importantly, it clears the mirror through which we view ourselves. What do you seek in another? Do you seek a witness or a rescuer, a partner or a placeholder for your pain? Without silence, how will you ever hear the difference? There is a quiet wisdom in solitude. But solitude alone is not enough. One must bring awareness into solitude. That is where the transformation happens. When the body goes silent and abstains from the usual patterns, touch, stimulation, flattery, performance, the soul begins to speak. And what it says is not always comforting. Sometimes, it reveals how much of your desire for connection is actually a desire to escape yourself. A woman once shared that after a series of toxic relationships, she made a vow, no dating for a year. Not because she hated men, not because she gave up on love, but because she finally wanted to meet herself. "I needed," she said, "to know the sound of my own thoughts without someone else's opinion in my ear. I needed to learn what made me feel safe, without begging for it." That year was not easy. The first months were full of loneliness, temptation, self-doubt. But something remarkable happened. Around the 6th month, she began to feel a new kind of peace. She no longer reached for her phone to fill silence. She no longer dressed to impress a stranger's gaze. She no longer shrank or stretched herself to match someone else's preference. She became clear, not only about what she wanted in a partner, but about what she was as a partner. This is the clarity that abstinence brings. It is not the kind that comes from thinking, but the kind that comes from being. In Eastern philosophy, the mind is likened to a lake. When agitated, it is impossible to see anything beneath the surface. Only when it becomes still do we gain insight into the depths. Relationships reflect this truth. When you enter them from a place of emotional turbulence, everything you see is distorted. You don't see the person as they are. You see what your nervous system hopes or fears they might be. Clarity through abstinence allows you to separate projection from perception. You no longer seek a savior. You seek someone you can meet soul to soul, without masks. You don't demand that they complete you. You desire only that they walk beside you, whole in themselves. But clarity is not just a psychological state, it is also a physiological one. Your nervous system, when constantly flooded with stimulation, sexual, emotional, digital, loses its sensitivity. Just like a muscle that is overused becomes sore and numb, the emotional body, when overstimulated, becomes confused. It can no longer differentiate between real connection and addictive familiarity. Abstinence resets this. It detoxifies your inner receptors. It gives you back the ability to sense, not just with the mind, but with the body. Have you ever noticed how, after fasting from sugar, even a piece of fruit tastes vibrant and sweet? The same is true for emotional fasting. When you abstain from the numbing habits of performative dating, hollow compliments, and shallow intimacy, even a genuine conversation becomes rich, a simple touch feels profound, a shared silence feels sacred. But we must be willing to endure the initial discomfort. For many, abstinence reveals how much of their emotional life has been built on avoiding themselves. In that silence, old fears return, of not being lovable, of being invisible, of being abandoned. These fears do not come to punish you. They come to be seen, to be healed. If you always run into someone's arms to escape them, you will never know which wounds are yours to tend. A man once shared how his pattern of jumping from one relationship to the next finally broke after a 6-month practice of celibacy and solitude. I realized, he said, that I'd never once asked myself what I value in a woman beyond attraction. I was so afraid of being alone that I confused chemistry with compatibility, lust with love, her presence with my worth. When he finally returned to the world of dating, he moved slowly. He asked deeper questions. He listened not just to words, but to energy. And most importantly, he listened to himself. Abstinence had given him more than control. It had given him discernment. And discernment is the beginning of wisdom in love. Without it, we are driven by impulse, fantasy, and fear. With it, we make choices that honor both self and other. Now consider this. The kind of partner you attract is often a reflection of the kind of energy you radiate. When your energy is chaotic, unclear, and needy, you attract those who thrive on that instability. But when your energy is calm, rooted, and self-sourced, you begin to attract people who are similarly aligned. Abstinence trains you to cultivate that energy. It teaches you to generate love from within, so that love from outside becomes a complement, not a crutch. In Chinese medicine, we often speak of Jing, the foundational life essence. This essence is diminished by excess, by indulgence, by scattering one's energy in too many directions. But it is replenished through stillness, breathwork, sexual restraint, and inner cultivation. A person whose Jing is strong is magnetic. They do not chase attention, they attract it, not through strategy but through substance. In relationship, this translates to presence. People sense it. They may not understand why they feel so safe, so drawn to you, but they do. And often, it is because you are no longer leaking energy. You are whole. The next step in this unfolding journey of abstinence and self-mastery is deeply connected to relational integrity, the cultivation of sacred intention. This is the awareness not only of what you are choosing but why. Most people enter relationships blindly, driven by hormones, loneliness, or social pressure. They attach without understanding the deeper impact of their choices. But sacred intention transforms this. It brings consciousness to connection. Every act of intimacy becomes a choice, not just to experience pleasure, but to exchange energy, not just to be seen, but to see, not just to take, but to offer. This intention requires abstinence to be truly understood. For when you abstain, you observe, you reflect, you ask questions not usually asked in the rush of desire. Is my attraction rooted in truth or trauma? Am I drawn to this person because they reflect my highest values, or because they soothe my oldest wounds? Sacred intention is about direction. It's about asking, where is this connection leading us, individually and together? It is not about control or certainty, but about clarity of movement. If the connection brings both people closer to their inner truth, it is sacred. If it leads to self-betrayal, it is a warning. There's a well-known quote from Rumi: try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you. Sacred intention does not resist change, but neither does it abandon discernment. It understands that not all chemistry is meant to be chased. Some energies are meant to teach you something and then pass through. There was once a woman who met a man during her yoga teacher training. They had instant chemistry, conversations that flowed, eyes that lingered, laughter that felt effortless. But something in her had changed. After years of deep healing, of practicing celibacy, of strengthening her emotional boundaries, she had become sensitive to energy. So instead of rushing into a relationship, she waited, she observed. And over time, she noticed that while their conversations were beautiful, his actions were inconsistent. He often disappeared emotionally, avoided deeper questions, and was vague about his intentions. In the past, she would have ignored these signs, hoping that chemistry would overcome confusion. But now, with sacred intention guiding her, she chose to step back. She honored the attraction, but she honored herself more. And in doing so, she remained in alignment, not just with her desires, but with her integrity. This is the power of abstinence. It sharpens your inner compass. It teaches you not to sacrifice your peace for temporary pleasure. It teaches you that the quality of your relationship with yourself sets the standard for every other bond in your life. To cultivate sacred intention also means to become mindful of the rituals you bring into connection. How do you touch? How do you listen? How do you show up, not just on the good days, but on the difficult ones? Intimacy, in its highest form, is a spiritual practice. It is not something you fall into by accident. It is something you walk into with devotion. And devotion requires discipline. There is an old Zen story of a monk who was asked how he approached every interaction. He said, "I enter each moment with three things: attention, respect, and emptiness. Attention, to truly see; respect, to honor the other's humanity; emptiness, to not let my past cloud this meeting." What would relationships look like if we entered them this way? Abstinence prepares us for such an approach. It clears out the residue of past lovers, past mistakes, past versions of ourselves. It makes room. And into that room, intention flows like a stream, gentle, clear, and unstoppable. The soul does not rush. It waits until the waters are still. Then it speaks. And when it speaks, it does not offer commands. It offers clarity. This clarity is what transforms abstinence from deprivation into devotion. It is no longer about what you are avoiding, about what you are preparing to receive. To walk this path is not to become cold or detached. It is to become deeply warm, but wisely guarded, not closed but selective, not hardened but refined. In this way, abstinence becomes an act of love, not just for others, but for yourself. It becomes a sacred commitment. I will not settle. I will not self-abandon. I will not dilute my energy to fit into what no longer honors my truth. And from this place, real love can grow. Not the kind that burns fast and disappears, but the kind that roots itself deep into the soil of your being and blooms, season after season, with strength, softness, and soul. When the body goes silent, the soul speaks, not with noise, but with knowing. This journey through abstinence has never truly been about denial. It has always been about remembrance. Remembering who you are when no one is watching. Remembering what you value when nothing is distracting. Remembering that your deepest needs are not met through constant stimulation, but through stillness, clarity, and presence. In the silence of abstinence, you begin to hear the truth that the noise of the world drowns out, that you are not empty when alone, you are whole. That love is not something to chase, it is something to align with. That intimacy is not measured by closeness of bodies, but by the honesty of souls. You have learned that every moment of abstinence, sexual, emotional, or even digital, is not a loss but a return to self-discipline, a return to sacred intention, a return to the wisdom of your own nervous system, no longer hijacked by urgency, but tuned to peace. You now understand that relationships do not begin when two people meet. They begin in how you prepare for that meeting. They begin in the spaces you clear, the wounds you tend, the energy you cultivate. Abstinence, used consciously, is how we make space for something deeper, for something real. As Master Shi Heng Yi would remind us, self-mastery is not about suppression. It is about balance, and balance comes from awareness of the body, the breath, the emotions, and the soul. In abstinence, you are not becoming less. You are becoming more whole, more grounded, more radiant in your presence. So when you choose silence, choose it not out of fear, but out of respect for your journey, for your energy, and for the quality of love you are willing to receive. Let that silence shape your discernment. Let it clarify your intention. Let it prepare you, not to escape the world, but to enter it with the strength of someone who no longer needs anything from it to feel complete. This is the truth behind abstinence. It is not the absence of desire, it is the elevation of it. It is desire refined, embodied, sacred, and from that sacred space, true connection is born, not from hunger, but from fullness, not from loneliness, but from love.